I'm legally required to say that this expose is just an expression of what I believe to be going on with Tai Lopez, the fake guru with the world's most punchable face. I'm confident that by the time you finish watching this video and have heard all the facts laid out before you, you'll agree with my beliefs on the current situation at hand. But legally, I still have to open it with this little disclaimer since get-rich-quick salesmen like Tai Lopez are very quick to threaten small channels with lawsuits and copyright strikes for speaking out against them. And my YouTube channel is certainly very small. You might remember Tai Lopez from his famous
"Here in my garage, just bought this new Lamborghini here,"
where he talks about reading a book every day because he likes knowledge more than materialistic things like his Lamborghini.
Knowledge.
Back in 2015, you couldn't watch any YouTube video without hearing him smugly talk about why it's important for everybody to call money fuel units.
Money, I don't call it money anymore. I call it fuel units. You must have enough fuel units to live out your dream and to live out your destiny. So
he dropped off the map after releasing that ad for his $3,000 get-rich-quick scheme and faded into relative obscurity. Oh, sorry, I meant 3,000 fuel units. But he's just resurfaced on the internet, and it isn't pretty what he's doing right now. While his Lamborghini spam was certainly amusing and slightly annoying, what Tai Lopez is doing right now is outright exploitative. To understand why, I'll have to introduce Retail Ecommerce Ventures, which I'll be referring to by its initials REV. REV is Tai Lopez's new startup company. There's a 5-minute long informative video on the company's website where he begs for investors while constantly implying that he's going to be the next Jeff Bezos.
If you're an accredited investor, I have something I think you're going to want to listen to. Jeff Bezos.
if you're an accredited investor, click that link below. And so if you missed that first 1994 opportunity, I want to present something to you that we've been doing and an opportunity that might fit into your accredited investor portfolio.
He goes over the business model of REV. In a nutshell, the company buys struggling brick and mortar stores and turns them into e-commerce brands. Pier 1 Imports, RadioShack, Dress Barn, Linens and things. In that video, he keeps mentioning how he needs accredited investors to invest in his company. But looking at the website, it's pretty clear that he's not actually looking for
Accredited investors.
There are several red flags. For one, all the bragging about REV points to how the companies were performing before REV acquired them. Nothing on the positive changes that REV has been bringing since the acquisition.
Pier 1 Imports, when we bought it the previous year.
This suggests that REV hasn't actually done much to improve the company's bottom line. Else, he'd be boasting about the positive changes REV has brought about instead of what was already done before they entered the picture. And an even larger red flag is how much emphasis he puts on the company's revenues.
1.7 billion in revenue.
For those who don't know, revenue is how much money a company brought in. Net income is how much total profit they made. It's total revenue minus total expenses. The net income is not to be confused with gross profit, which is the revenue minus the cost of goods sold. Gross profit is used to find the profit margin on the products. It doesn't take into account the taxes paid or employee wages or any sort of operating expenses. A company can rake in $1 trillion in revenue, but it would still be an abysmal model if it had to spend $1 trillion in order to accomplish that. No investor worth his salt gives 3 burning shits what a company's revenue is. Net income, not revenue, is the golden indicator on a company's financial well-being. The revenue is a completely worthless number whose only value is to be used to calculate the gross profit, and from there, calculate the net income. So with this in mind, what were the net incomes of REV's companies? Saying that they're not very high would be a severe overstatement. They're non-existent. As REV's website touts, Pier 1 Import did indeed have a revenue of $1.5 billion in 2019, but it came at the cost of spending $1.7 billion, meaning Pier 1 Imports lost $200 million the year Tai Lopez bought them. What about RadioShack? REV doesn't give any sort of information regarding RadioShack's financials. You know, the indicators an investor looking to make money would be interested in. But instead, REV says that there were 7,000 RadioShack stores at its peak. This is, if anything, even more worthless of information than Pier 1 Imports revenue numbers. Nobody cares how a company was doing at the height of its heyday. It's irrelevant. We're not living in those times anymore. Arthur Andersen was once considered one of the big 5 accounting firms. As its name suggests, it was one of the 5 accounting firms that completely dominated the global accounting industry. You'll notice I said Arthur Andersen was one of the big 5. That's because the big 5 are now referred to as the big 4. Arthur Andersen got involved in a massive accounting scandal with Enron, the then largest natural gas producer in the country. Again, notice the past tense. As a result of the scandal, both Enron and Arthur Andersen went bankrupt. The former was deemed defunct in 2001, and the latter was reduced to a shadow of its former self. While in 2002, Arthur Andersen boasted of having 28,000 employees, in 2005, the once dominating global accounting force employed less than 200.
Brands like RadioShack, 8,000 stores in America at its peak.
Tai Lopez asking for investors by saying RadioShack had 7,000 stores at its peak would be akin to me suggesting in 2005 that we should all invest in what's left of Arthur Andersen, because they had once employed 28,000 people at its peak.
Pier 1 Imports, Dress Barn, Modell Sporting Goods, Steinmart, Linens and Things, Franklin Mint.
Every single one of them follows this exact same pattern I've just laid out. Their entire selling points are the company's revenues instead of any actual useful information, and the number of locations instead of any actual useful information. Keep in mind that the company revenues REV is providing are, again, its pre-acquisition financials, meaning the bragging points are things Tai Lopez didn't actually have any part in. Oh, and do you see this woman? She's the president of REV, which makes her the single most important person in the company. She's also Tai Lopez's cousin. Because nothing encourages people to invest in the longevity of a company like nepotism. So, with all of this in mind, what accredited investor would actually want to invest in REV? No investor. Your money would be better spent buying index funds or Dogecoin or even just sitting in a savings account. At least in a savings account, your money isn't at risk of suddenly tanking overnight because the snake oil salesman of a founder did something stupid. So, Tai Lopez started a company that buys unprofitable businesses and uses his social media clout to try to trick his impressionable fan base into giving him money. But what's this about stealing people's informations that I teased about in the title of this video? This is actually how I found out about the giant charade REV is involved in. I very nearly got my information stolen. REV decided to take advantage of the work-from-home craze currently sweeping the nation to put out fake job postings on LinkedIn, such as this posting claiming to be looking for a drop shipper. Just like with the company's website, there are very many red flags about this job posting. The first of which being that if REV takes legitimate brick-and-mortar stores like Pier 1 Imports and RadioShack and turns them into e-commerce brands, then there's literally no room in the business for a drop shipper. A drop shipper, for those who don't know, is someone who sets up a storefront and advertises items he doesn't actually have on hand. For example's sake, let's say this drop shipper is selling a music box that plays Harry Potter music. This seller on Etsy is selling the box for $12. Keep that price in mind. Let's say you buy the music box from this Etsy store. The dropshipper takes that $12, goes to AliExpress or Wish.com, and pays $5 while entering in your shipping information that you just provided when you paid $12. The AliExpress or Wish.com seller takes the $5 the dropshipper just gave them and ships you, the Etsy buyer, the box, leaving the Etsy seller, the dropshipper, with a cool $7 profit for doing nothing at all except copy-pasting your name and address into a couple different fields. I took this screenshot on June 27th. The estimated arrival date is July 21st to July 28th. Do you want to know why the box says it should take a whole month to arrive? It's not because the box is handmade. It isn't. They're all mass-produced in Chinese factories. It's because that's how long it takes for the music box to ship from China to the United States with the cheapest shipping option. I bring this up not to show how so many people who shop online are getting duped. I bring this up to highlight the fact that RadioShack, Pier 1 Imports, Dress Barn, Linens and stuff, none of the companies REV owns can actually engage in drop shipping. By definition of drop shipping, the seller never actually sees or interacts with the items they're selling. There's no inventory for drop shippers, but all of the companies REV owns that rely on brick and mortar stores do indeed have inventory. You walk into a store and see everything they're selling. That's the inventory. Yes, Tai Lopez is planning on turning these companies into e-commerce brands, which won't require brick and mortar stores. But they'll still very much need to have an inventory. Do you think that RadioShack is going to suddenly start successfully dropshipping 32-inch TVs? No. Use your common sense. If someone's buying a TV, well, first of all, they sure as hell wouldn't be buying it from a RadioShack. But more importantly, they're not going to buy a fucking dropship television set. By its very nature, dropshipping isn't sustainable. With 2-day free shipping becoming the norm, no customer is going to want to wait a whole month for their item to be delivered when they could have it in a couple of days buying it from a legitimate retailer, or in a couple of hours by buying it from their local brick and mortar store. What's more, people will learn that they can buy an identical item in every single regard for a fraction of a price by buying it from the wholesale website that the dropshippers are sourcing their products from. But this is different, I hear some of you typing. RadioShack and Pier 1 Imports and Models and Dress Barn and all the other businesses that REV owns all have brand value that people will pay additional money for. No, they don't. The whole point of REV is to, and a quote from the ad on Google, turn distressed businesses into e-commerce powerhouses. The businesses REV owns are distressed because nobody shops there anymore. In accounting, there's an asset a company can own called goodwill, which refers to the strength of its brand. How much the company's name is worth. When companies write their financial reports, they'll often include an estimation on how much money their brand is worth. For example, on March 31st, 2021, Facebook estimated that their goodwill was worth $19 billion.
Billions, with a B.
You want to guess what RadioShack's last financial statement listed their goodwill as? Was it $100 million? $50 million? $10 million? No, it was $0. According to RadioShack, in their last financial statement prepared for investors, the value of their brand was completely worthless. $0.
Zero.
After all this time, I finally laid down the proper groundwork regarding Retail Ecommerce Ventures. Tai Lopez is being deliberately misleading about the failing companies he owns, not admitting that they're all inherently financially unsustainable to grab as much money from his social media followers as possible. So what's with all of this about theft of personal information? The job postings REV has on LinkedIn are all fake. Not just because they're for positions that make no sense, but because they're literally, not figuratively, just email grabbers. If you apply to one of these jobs, which I did but don't recommend that you do, you'll immediately receive a congratulatory email for making it to the next round of the application and asking you to take an IQ and personality test on a website called life-compass.com. This by itself isn't terribly unusual. A lot of companies use personality tests to make sure their employees are strong cultural fits for the corporate environment, and IQ tests are used despite being completely flawed. Someone who's dyslexic is basically guaranteed to fail this test regardless of how quote-unquote smart they are. So at this point, I didn't have any red flags going off. This was all fairly standard procedure. I started with the personality test first. The first thing I noticed is that the questions seemed a little bit different from what's normally asked. Normal employment personality questions are scenarios like true or false, I prefer working alone as opposed to working with teams. Or, on a scale of 1 through 5, how important is employer-sponsored insurance? Something that made me chuckle is how the first thing you see when you start the test is a message saying, "There are no wrong answers, so please answer honestly," even though there very clearly were wrong answers. The Life Compass questions asked whether or not you agreed with the statements provided and included such highlights like, "Most people forget more easily the death of their parents than their loss of their property," and "People suffering from incurable diseases should have a choice of being put painlessly to death." Alright, unusual questions for sure. I'm not entirely sure how my views on assisted suicide have anything to do with dropshipping perfume for Tai Lopez, but whatever. Then I got to the questions asking, "I like to get revenge on authorities," and "Payback needs to be quick and nasty," and "There's a sucker born every minute," and my personal favorite, "People who mess with me always regret it." I'm not kidding. These are legitimately the questions Tai Lopez is asking to supposedly screen for his fake job openings. At this point, I was fairly confident that this was all BS. The question, "People often say I'm out of control," definitely helped me arrive to that conclusion. So then I moved on to the IQ test. But in reality, this was actually just a vocabulary test. Most cognitive assessment tests, as the corporate environment calls them, are used to test a person's spatial manipulation skills, whether they can rotate an object in their minds or memorize how many 90-degree angles a certain polygon has. Stuff like that. Tai Lopez just wanted to see how well you memorize your SAT vocab study cards. If you want definitive proof that this IQ test is completely worthless, there's no proof better than this screenshot right here saying that my IQ is 135. Now, I've legitimately never taken a legitimate IQ test, but given the fact that an IQ of 135 would put me in the top 1% of IQs, I think it's fair to say that this is sufficient evidence that this is all BS. But even if this wasn't worthless and I am in actuality a super mega over genius, I'm not really sure how me being able to define the word edible has to do with the work Tai Lopez is allegedly hiring for. In fact, I know me being able to define space doesn't have any impact on my capabilities as a corporate buyer. You know this too, as does Tai Lopez, because the very next screen showed me what his whole endgame was about. The very next screen showed a congratulatory message along with an invitation to give your contact information in order to receive your test results. All of this was just to get your phone number, email address, and consent to receive sales calls. Think about it rationally. If you're applying to a legitimate company who wants you to take a personality and cognitive assessment test to see whether or not you're worth hiring, then why would the test provider ask for your contact information to give you the test results? Surely, if the hiring company puts so much faith in these tests and if it's a legitimate job opening that they actually want to fill, then the company would be the one getting the test result. Why send it to the applicant and hope that the applicant will send it over to you? I asked my job recruiter the self-same question and was met with crickets. She didn't give me a response because she couldn't give me a response that made any sort of sense. Because they don't care about what you answer for the IQ or personality test. All they care about is getting your contact information and permission to receive sales calls through this checked box. Also, I would like to point out that this woman doesn't want to know that she works for Tai Lopez at Retail Ecommerce Ventures. Her LinkedIn page says she works at Penguin Random House Publishing. She's shameless enough to publicly inform the world that she worked for Philip Morris, the tobacco giant, for 3 years. But REV is too much? And yes, this is the correct Augustina Martin. Here's the job posting page for REV's dropshipper, and here's her profile at the bottom of the listing, meaning she's the one who created the job posting. Anyway, once Tai Lopez has gotten your contact information from this form, he'll be to spam you with all sorts of weird unsolicited phone calls. But how do we know that Tai Lopez is the one getting his mittens on this data? You wouldn't know navigating around the Life Compass website that this is Tai Lopez's website. There's no mention of the word Tai or Lopez anywhere. Instead, the site very clearly wants you to have the impression that an old barf named Andy is a mastermind behind everything. Now, I don't know if Andy is a real person. I highly doubt he is, given the fact that his photo looks like one of those AI-generated human faces, and all of his supposed credentials are coincidentally certificates that can't be proven to actually belong to him. Instead of a diploma, which anybody could verify, he's got stuff like completed training and coaching with intent based on the 4 agreements and new agreements in the workplace. A diploma, by the way, is the bare fucking minimum to be named director at any large company, let alone a Fortune 100 company, one of the 100 largest companies in the world, that life-compass.com claims that Andy was the director of communications and marketing at, while also conveniently not naming this company because, that could actually be verified. So Tai Lopez doesn't want his name associated with Life Compass. But he slipped up. Twice. The biggest giveaway is that the personality test literally redirects you to tailopez.com. But also because in September 2017, he tweeted a poll asking his 12-year-old fans, "What should I name the new personality test I created? Millionaire Quiz or Life Compass Quiz?" I'll let you guess which one got the most votes. That's it. Tai Lopez used the money he made from selling his get-rich-quick scheme to create a startup which buys failing companies hemorrhaging cash, so he can pretend they're viable investment opportunities to his young fan base. As a side benefit, this company also lets him put out bogus job postings on LinkedIn to entice people to take his personality test, which immediately signs them up for his email list. For the sake of research, I gave Tai Lopez the email address to a spam account on June 27th. Since then, he's been spamming me with ads for his $5,887 personal development webinars literally every single day without fail. Tai Lopez doesn't need a job applicant anymore once he's gotten their phone number, email address, and consent to be spammed with. And so, now that Tai Lopez has achieved his endgame, he'll finally drop all pretenses of a job and never talk to the applicants about the posting ever again. Something that the Life Compass website said to give Andy more credibility was that he had written a book titled Smoke Signals from the Universe. The only problem is, though, nobody has actually read that book. Despite the fact that it was published all the way back in 2008, it somehow only managed to find 2 reviews on Amazon.